What's up, everyone? Back Gajewski here, back again, talking college football. Today, we've got UCLA on deck. Before we get started, if you like this content, please consider hitting the thumbs up button, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a comment. Those help us a ton, so thank you if you have supported a small channel like this. It means a lot. First, we are going to turn the page back and take a look at what happened last year for UCLA before we spin this forward and get into the roster, including transfers, departures, anyone they added from their recruiting classes. We'll break down it all. But first, here are the efficiency metrics for UCLA last year. A weird season, trying to frame this as a season of growth. It was the first year for first-time head coach Deshaun Foster. He finishes 5-7, and there were a lot of close calls in this season, but he was a first-time coach. He previously was coaching running backs for this team from 2017 to 2023. There were a lot of blips on the radar along the way. If you remember, very early in the year, there were times where he only had 9 guys on the field. And then fortunately, you can say they win 4 of their last 6 games, but still it was a very tight season. All of their wins came by single digits: Hawaii by 3, Rutgers by 3, Nebraska by 7, Iowa by 3, Fresno State by a touchdown. And as far as losses go, only Minnesota and USC were by single digits. The rest of their opponents beat them by double digits and pretty soundly. However, that group was Indiana, LSU, Oregon, Penn State, and Washington. So there's not exactly any shame with those losses, but still, you lose 7 games, you lose a lot of them by double digits, you're just going to have your efficiency metrics look like UCLA's here. Their offense was outside the top 100. Their quarterback position was not figured out exactly with Ethan Garbers. They had a lot of receiver injuries very early in the season. Their offensive line was a huge problem. They were outside the top 110 in both pass blocking and run blocking. And then defensively, outside of Carson Schlesinger, this unit had a lot of problems, and they finished 88th overall. Now you have Deshaun Foster entering year 2. At least we saw the growth from the beginning of the season towards the end. Unfortunately, he already had to change offensive coordinators after the failed hiring of Eric Bieniemy. So they go to Tino Sunseri, who was the co-OC of Indiana last year. Previously coached quarterbacks for James Madison for 3 years before moving over to Indiana. This offense is probably going to look a lot more like Indiana's this year. A lot of motions, a little less nonsense that Eric Bieniemy was throwing underneath all the time, and probably far more balance than what we saw last year. At defensive coordinator, at least there's some continuity here. Ikaika Malloy is back for his 2nd year as DC. Malloy previously was coaching the defensive line for UCLA. He worked as Washington's co-DC from 2020 to 2021. This unit was a little better than the offense, but it still has a long ways to go overall. Let's look at talent acquisition for UCLA. It's a bit of a team still in transition considering the coaching change they made last cycle. They did see a vast improvement in recruiting, which is huge for them. When they made the coaching transition, the recruiting dropped all the way to 90th. That was a huge criticism of the previous regime. And now with Deshaun Foster, you see them jump to 42nd in his first true cycle. As far as retention goes, I'm actually a little surprised. I thought it would be worse considering the coaching change. But you go from Chip Kelly, you move to Deshaun Foster. By all regards, he is considered a player's coach. So I'm not super surprised. Even the previous regime's recruiting classes are sticking around with UCLA. As far as the transfer goes, transfer portal, this team is all over the board. They were 10th, then they moved to 44th. This year, they're 20th. While they're still coming in a little bit behind most of the Big Ten in recruiting, they are getting some players via transfer, especially this year they get Nico Iamaleava and his brother, honestly, to bolster this class. And I highlight those guys because they come at key positions, the quarterback, of course. So talent, getting there on the up and up. It's looking positive. Let's take a look at the roster and see what UCLA has this year. Here's our little 2-deep depth chart we created. Transfers are in yellow. We next have their year in school, followed by how many snaps they played the last 2 years, what recruit they were in terms of a star rating, and then a value score, which looks first at your recruitment. Then the more snaps you play, the less it looks at recruiting, the more it looks at on-field play. Which brings us to the quarterback room, which is comprised entirely of transfers. Nico Iamaleava comes in from Tennessee after the fiasco there, asking for money, doesn't get it. subsequently settles for less money with UCLA. The one thing you can say is he is definitely an upgrade on Joey Aguilar. He's definitely an upgrade on Ethan Garbers. We have a 5-star quarterback here. And we have his little brother coming in from Arkansas. He technically is still a freshman 4-star. He spent the spring with Arkansas and flips to follow his brother Nico. So you have 2 players right away. And then you have Pierce Clarkson, a former 4-star, now a redshirt sophomore, previously of Louisville. This is a loaded quarterback room suddenly after the cover was completely bare last year. Starting with Nico Iamaleava, he's 6'6", 215, completed 63.8% of his passes for 2,616 yards last year. That was 7.8 yards per attempt, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He had 17 big-time throws and 11 turnover-worthy plays. He's mobile. He also rushed for 358 yards, which was 3.3 yards per carry. And he also took 30 sacks. The biggest problem with his game is this propensity to take sacks. He had a 25% pressure to sack ratio. That was below average. And he held on the ball for too long, 2.95 seconds per throw. If we can cut down the sack numbers, you're going to see not only his rushing numbers increase, but potentially some better passing efficiency. This is a big question, though. UCLA's offensive line is definitely a work in progress. Overall, Iamaleava was the 41st most efficient QB in college football last year. Now mentioned above, we have Pierce Clarkson, we have Madden Iamaleava. If Nico goes down, the quarterback room is actually one of the deeper units in the Big Ten. This is a bit surprising considering UCLA last year. At running back, they lose TJ Harden and a few other depth guys. Bring in 2 transfers, Javian Thomas from Cal and Anthony Woods from Utah. Thomas was pressed into action last year when Jaden Ott got hurt. He's 5'10", 190, rushed for 626 yards, which was 6.3 yards per carry, and he caught 11 passes. 3.11 yards after contact per attempt was pretty solid for him. He should get the first crack at this job. Woods, I don't really know what to make of. We mentioned he transferred from Utah, but he actually never played a snap there. He came to Utah last year from Idaho, where he rushed for 1,992 yards and 19 touchdowns in 2 seasons while catching 21 passes. His efficiency was pretty good in the FCS, and then as you can see, he clearly did not play well enough to beat out any of the Utah backs, which was not the best running back room in the Big 12. So I'm not sure what to make of him. He's sort of a wild card. I certainly think Thomas is ahead. And we might see some other players just jump Woods. They still have Jalen Berger, the former 4-star. He's 6'1", 215, averaged 3.7 yards per carry last year on a very small workload. He's had a hard time being efficient with multiple schools now, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and UCLA. So I'm not really too optimistic with him. They also get Anthony Frias, the second back, the former Kansas State transfer. He played 48 snaps last year. And perhaps this just comes down to their 4-star freshman, Carson Cox. This is not exactly a prohibitive running back unit. Honestly, I think if you're going to find a ceiling with this, it's probably just Thomas being a bell cow, or maybe Carson Cox lives up to his recruitment right away as a true freshman. At wide receiver, they lose 2 of their top players in J. Michael Sturdivant and Logan Loya, both to transfer, but they have a lot of talent here. There's a trio of former 4-stars in Quasi Gilmer, Titus Mokiao Atimalala, and Rico Flores. Starting with Gilmer, he's 6'2", 180 pounds, now entering his sophomore season. He caught 31 balls for 345 yards, played about 55% of his snaps in the slot with 1.19 yards per route. Not the most efficient, but that's still pretty solid for a freshman. There's a lot to build on. Mokiao Atimalala is 6'1", 190. He caught 28 balls for 294 yards. He's now a redshirt senior. Again, about 50% of the time he was in the slot, 1.04 yards per route. It's not fantastic. He's had a hard time getting on the field despite being a 4-star. And then Rico Flores, he's 6'2", 205, a former Notre Dame transfer. He only played in 4 games last year due to injury, caught 12 passes for 187 yards. In and out of the slot, again, 50% of the time, but 1.6 yards per route was pretty efficient considering the other guys here. If those 3 4-stars do not live up to expectations, they also bring in Caden Robinson from Appalachian State, Mikey Matthews from Cal, and Jaden Wilson from Arkansas. Robinson's 6'2", 205. He was originally recruited by UCF before he transferred to App State. From there, last year he caught 53 balls for 832 yards, 91% slot player, 2.4 yards per route is awesome. He now has 2,158 yards over the last 3 years with App State. Just incredible productivity. Now needs to move that up to the Big Ten. Matthews is a former four-star originally recruited by Utah, and then he played with Cal last year. 32 balls for him, catches that is, for 272 yards. 91% of his snaps came in the slot, 1.07 yards per out. He's had a hard time getting on the field through his first 3 years, even though he was a four-star, and this is now his third school in just as many years. Wilson, not projecting much of a role for him, only appeared in one game last year with Arkansas. He's 6'3", 178. In and out of the slot, 18 catches through 4 seasons. He hasn't really done much. But overall, that's going to be probably your top 6 receivers. They just don't have anyone else who's proven. Carter Shaw, 77 snaps for him. Xavier Staples had 11 snaps. They do have a four-star sophomore in Grant Gray, so he's probably another name to at least mention. But this unit, I'm expecting to be a little better. Just not sure what the ceiling is, considering you have 3 transfers and 3 former four-stars yet to live up to expectation. At least some of them are young, like Quasi Gilmer. At tight end, they lose their top pass catcher in Maliki Matavao. They do return 276 snaps from former four-star Jack Pedersen, who's 6'4", 245. He had 12 catches last year, which was pretty decent, but he was also a below-average blocker. Fortunately, they are getting back Hudson Habermel from injury. He missed all of last season. 6'7", 250 pounds, a very good blocker. He's not caught the ball a ton. He had 24 catches in his 2 prior seasons before injury, but he should be on the field in 12 personnel sets. They also get back Jake Renda, who's a Pittsburgh transfer, hasn't played a lot so far. The big question for this team, though, is going to be their offensive line. This unit derailed them last year. They do lose 3 starters. Fortunately, I guess it's addition by subtraction because all 3 were below average starters. Their best player, Garrett DeGorgio, is back after starting the last 3 years. 25 pressures allowed last year, solid run blocking metrics. He's probably going to be their best player. And 25 pressures sounds like a lot, but remember, this was a moronic Eric Bieniemy offense that was very predictable and passing a ton, predictably. So, I mean, you almost need to look at the percentages. 25 pressures in this UCLA offense is not as many pressures as some other teams that are very run-heavy. Anyway, he's right tackle for the most part. Left tackle probably goes to former USC and Kentucky transfer Cortland Ford. He was benched last year after he missed a lot of time due to injury, only got off 42 snaps. He did play 204 in 2023, but you have to go all the way back to 2021 with USC to find some full-time starting snaps from him. And basically, anytime you see him play on the field, whether it's in relief, before injury, full-time starting in 2021, everything he's put out there has been average. And there's some high level of competition, Pac-12 and SEC. He should be able to put on average tape in the Big Ten. Maybe even better if he can stay healthy. There are some other options. Not the best options, though. Katie Arnold comes in from Jacksonville State. He started the first 3 games last year. He got benched. Ruben Unije is back. He's a former Houston transfer, has over 1,500 snaps, but he's been way up and down. Last year, he was way down, 10 pressures on 164 snaps. Yutaka Mahi's back. He started 3 games and played horribly last year, 19 pressures on 187 snaps. Jalen Jeffers is back. He's a former Oregon transfer. I guess he was decent on 150 snaps. And then I guess Jensen Somerville, a freshman. This isn't exactly a prohibitive tackle unit in front of him. So, I mean, probably the best thing you can say is there's more options than last year. I'm just not really optimistic about any of them. I think your 2 best tackles are probably DeGorgio and Ford. At center, they do return Sam Yoon. He was a below-average starter last year, allowed 23 pressures on 534 snaps, a below-average run blocker. They just don't have a lot else. At guard, they add Eugene Brooks from Oklahoma. He's a former 4-star, a redshirt freshman, did not play a snap last year, but very young player. They also get Julian Armella from Florida State. He's another 4-star, only has 104 snaps to his name. So you have 2 very young, unproven guards, but at least they're 4-stars. That's better than what UCLA has been bringing in recent classes under Chip Kelly. As far as depth on the interior, redshirt freshman 4-star Mark Scholler is still there, but that's about it. The rest of this group is pretty unproven and lower level in terms of recruiting. Maybe they decide to move one of those tackles, the former transfers from the last couple of years, inside the guard, but I don't think they have to. Basically, bottom line, this offensive line should be better, not by much else other than they can't get much worse. I do like the guard transfers. Hopefully you can get better play out of guys like Yoon, but man, there's still a lot to be desired here. If Iamaleava wasn't happy with the offensive line of Tennessee, I'm not sure he's going to love the UCLA offensive line. Defense, off the edge, they return their top player, Oladejo, but they do return Devin Ipui and Jacob Busick. Ipui, he's a former Notre Dame transfer. UCLA, please update your roster and put pronunciations on there. Thank you. Anyway, he played 431 snaps, 270 pounds, very bad player on the field, 6 pressures, 2 sacks, poor run defender. You can't have 6 pressures on 431 snaps. That is one of the worst marks I've ever really seen. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with him. Busick is a little better, I guess. He's a Navy transfer, though. He played 276 snaps. He had 7 pressures on, half the snaps, so I guess that's good, 1 sack. He was a better run defender, but, this is a very below-average pass rushing unit as far as incumbents go. The only other player that got a snap for this team last year was Grant Buckley. So probably looking at transfers. They had Nico DeVilliers from Arkansas, Anthony Jones from Michigan State, and Keyshawn Bennett from Michigan. So DeVilliers, he played 362 snaps last year. He had 14 pressures and 1 sack. He's immediately more productive than anyone else who played a snap last year, at least among the incumbents. He was a good run defender as well. Jones originally was a 3-star recruit with Oregon. He subsequently moved to Indiana, and then last year he played with Michigan State, so well-traveled at this point, but he has 608 snaps combined the last 2 years. He's a pretty good player, solid in run defense. Pass rush could use a little bit of work. He has 11 pressures last year. And then Bennett, he's 257 pounds, only 65 snaps to his name through 3 years of college football, but he's a former 4-star. You just don't have a lot of these on defense with UCLA. So that's probably where you're looking. This unit was not the greatest last year, but I'm not sure they're a whole lot better. They were 112, so they kind of have to be. We'll see. Inside, I think the 2 main players that are going to contribute for this team were both injured last year. You had Keanu Williams. He started the first 2 games at the UCLA before he got hurt. He began his career with Oregon. Then he played 248 snaps in 2023. He's 310 pounds, good run defense numbers. And then you have Gary Smith III. He missed all last year with injury, but he played 487 snaps between 2022 and 23. He was an elite run defender. He's 315 pounds, 9 pressures inside. There's not a lot to compete with, so I think these are probably your top 2 players. Otherwise, we have Siale Taupaki. He played 272 snaps. He was below average. He's 310. You have AJ Fuimaunu. He played 195 snaps. He was below average at 310 pounds, only had 1 pressure. They do have a transfer in Ashton Sanders. He's a redshirt freshman 3-star from Oklahoma with 47 snaps. But you can quickly see there's not too much barring the way for Keanu Williams and Gary Smith to get right back to form after they were hurt last year, which certainly affected their run defense numbers. Those are 2 players clogging up the middle of that defensive line that weigh over 300 pounds. So I do expect their run defense to be a little improved, and it kind of starts with that unit. Their run defense was one of their better units last year, and they were still a little below average. At linebacker, the 2 biggest losses on the whole team are probably Carson Schlesinger and Kane Medrano. They do bring in Isaiah Chisholm from Oregon State. He played 595 snaps last year. He was second on that team with tackles, 81. Completion percentage at 81% for 185 squirrel yards and 1 PBU. It's not the best. He finished slightly above average, kind of brought down by those coverage numbers. He was a better run defender, but that's at least a place to start. From there, John Vaughns is back for his senior season. He only got off 100 snaps last year. He's a former 4-star who's never quite lived up to his recruitment. 3-stars, Jalen Woods and Ty Lee are back. Lee only played 1 snap, but Woods played 186. He was good on a small sample, but it's hard to evaluate. So who is even going to be the second backer opposite Chisholm? I'm not sure. This could be a unit of weakness for UCLA. At least a question for me right now. We're going to see what develops at the linebacker position. The secondary was the best unit on the whole team. This unit finished in the top 50. They were 48th, but they lose everybody. They added 8 transfers at corner. Andre Jordan from Oregon State, Scooter Jackson from Utah Tech, Jameer Johnson from Indiana, Roderick Pleasant from Oregon, Benjamin Perry from Louisville, Cole Martin from Arizona State, Robert Stafford from Miami, and Aaron Williams from Louisville. Andre Jordan Jr. from Oregon State, he played 480 snaps on the boundary last year. I think he's going to be one of the starters. He was good in run defense, a 63% completion for 352 scoreless yards and 4 PBUs. He was above average. You're also looking at Pleasant. He's a redshirt sophomore 4-star with 73 snaps combined the last 2 years. He also runs track, so his development has sort of been stymied a little bit. Jameer Johnson from Indiana. He's formerly a 4-star with Texas. He played 602 snaps last year, average run defense numbers, a 67% completion percentage for 351 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 3 PBUs. He is a decent level player for this team. I think you're probably looking at 2 of these 3 starting on the boundary. As far as some other depth pieces, Scooter Jackson from Utah Tech. He's actually a former 3-star. He had some FBS offers, but he elected to play in the FCS first. Then he transfers back up. He had a great season in the FCS last year. He's probably more of a depth piece, as are Stafford from Miami, Williams from Louisville. They're just young. Robert Stafford is a 4-star. He only has 31 snaps, though. Now he's entering his sophomore season. Aaron Williams is a 4-star sophomore as well. He played just 1 snap last year. So those guys could certainly carve out a role. They definitely have the recruiting pedigree. They just don't have the experience that a lot of the other players like Andre Jordan and Jameer Johnson and even Roderick Pleasant to a degree have. In the slot, I think you're probably looking at Ben Perry, who has 1,357 snaps with Louisville over the last 3 years. His play has sort of stagnated a little bit to slightly above average. He's a good run defender, but he allowed an 84% completion percentage for 204 scoreless yards. We'll see. He's probably the best candidate. He is the most experienced in the slot. They do get former 4-star Cole Martin from Oregon and Arizona State. Last year, he suffered an injury in week 2, but he was projected to start for that Sun Devils team. He's following his dad here, who's a coach, but he has flashed when he's been on the field. Cole Martin is a candidate to play the slot as well. At safety, they bring in Key Lawrence from Ole Miss and Byron Threats from UCF. Lawrence originally played with Tennessee, then he goes and plays 3 years with Oklahoma before hitting the bench with Ole Miss last year. He has 1,423 snaps to his name. Played the best with Oklahoma. Threat spent his first 3 years with Cincinnati before getting off just 73 snaps with UCF last year. He does have 2 years of starting experience, so that is solid. And maybe they move some players around to just get their best 5 on the field. It's a pretty good secondary overall with a weakness at safety. There's a lot of really high-level recruits. They will be sort of chasing last year's group after how good that unit actually was, though. It's a good overall roster. Definitely upgraded at QB. Running back was not a good position. Wide receiver either. Offensive line, they can't possibly be worse. The question is, are they above average, or is this like strictly an average to slightly below average team? Defense, I think they could take a little bit of a step back, but they're sort of changing. I think they'll be better up front and a little worse in the secondary, and hopefully that can just get them to average. Special teams, they do return Mateen Baghani at kicker. He started the last 2 years. He's perfect on extra points. He was 28 of 33 on field goals, and all his misses came beyond 40 yards. He was even 3 of 5 on 50-plus yard field goals. Baghani was the 16th most efficient kicker in college football, which is an excellent place to start. I think just having Foster being a year more experienced is going to help this team with things like special teams. After last year, they were doing weird stuff like having 9 guys on the field at times. But as usual, this is going to come down to schedule. Let's take a look at what UCLA plays this year. Couple weird non-con games. You have Utah, and then you have a road trip to UNLV with a new coaching staff. Neither are easy. You're probably going to be an underdog to Utah. That game is at home, so maybe it's going to be close to a pick-em. You should be favored against UNLV, probably close to a touchdown in that game, maybe a little more. So at worst, I think you could be 1-2, but you're probably 2-1 in non-conference. From there, in the Big Ten, on the big dogs, they face Penn State and Ohio State. They dodge Oregon and Michigan. They do play a lot of the middle class. USC, Nebraska, Indiana, and Washington are on the schedule. But they do also have 3 of the weaker teams in Maryland, Michigan State, and Northwestern. So just based on projections and who we have favored and who we have as an underdog, currently we're getting UCLA to 5 wins. They will be favored in 5 games if the season started today. However, they are creeping closer to teams in that middle class like USC, Nebraska, Indiana, and Washington. So don't be terribly surprised if the play on the field actually reflects that and maybe they jump one of these teams. The middle class, you see a lot of jockeying year in and year out, so don't be surprised if UCLA is a bowl team We have them slightly just shy of that this year. But let me know what you expect. Always curious to hear what you guys think, especially those of you close to the program. We'll be back again soon with more breakdowns. Until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you later.